I was born with a ledger instead of a nervous system. The first entry was recorded when I was 4. My mother dropped a cast-iron skillet on my bare foot. I looked down at the blooming purple bruise and asked if we could make pancakes. My mother stared at me for a long time. Then she smiled. That smile was not a warm thing. It was a calculation. A line item added to a spreadsheet I didn't know existed. "You will be very useful," she whispered. I thought useful meant loved. I was wrong. My name is Iris, and I do not feel pain. The doctors called it congenital insensitivity to pain with a side of mild cognitive latency. The world reaches my brain a few milliseconds slower. As if I am underwater, watching the surface ripple without ever breaking through. My mother, Miranda Vance, was the founder of a boutique crisis management firm. She specialized in making scandals disappear for men with too much money. My father, Douglas Vance, ran a mid-sized hedge fund that specialized in shorting human decency. They divorced when I was 9. The custody battle was not about love. It was about legacy. My older brother, Julian, was the designated heir. He had the right reflexes, the right smile, the right kind of fear in his eyes. I was the defective asset. The daughter who could not be paraded at galas because she might not flinch when insulted. Who could not be trusted to cry on cue. The mediation transcripts, which I read years later on a hacked server, referred to me as a liability with a medical anomaly. My father wanted Julian. My mother negotiated to keep both of us. Not out of maternal devotion. She told the mediator that I was a necessary educational tool. I learned what that meant the first time Julian failed a Latin exam. He was 8. I was 8. We are not twins in this story. We are 13 months apart, but some bonds are forged in parallel. My mother sat him down at the kitchen island. The granite was black and cold. She made him recount every question he had gotten wrong. Then she called me over. I went willingly. I always did. She unplugged the cord from the espresso machine. She wrapped it twice around her palm. She swung. The cord left a raised welt on my forearm. I watched it rise like a red sunrise. It did not hurt. I did not flinch. Julian screamed. My mother grabbed his chin and forced him to look at the mark on my skin. "This is the cost of failure," she said. "Your incompetence writes itself onto your sister's body. Do you want to see more?" Julian sobbed and shook his head. I stood there with my arm extended like a specimen, trying to catch his eye, trying to telegraph that I was fine. "It doesn't hurt me," I wanted to say. But I knew even then that my silence was part of her design. This became our liturgy. Julian would stumble. A misplaced decimal on a math competition. A piano recital where his fingers slipped. A single B+ on a report card designed by sadists. And I would become the parchment. My mother was inventive. She understood that physical pain is not the only currency. Sometimes she would lock me in the wine cellar for 6 hours. The temperature a constant 56 degrees. I would sit among the Chateau Margaux and count the bottles, arranging them by vintage in my head. When Julian saw me emerge pale and shivering, his guilt would quadruple. His next performance would be flawless. Sometimes she would take his favorite book, a first edition of Dune that our grandfather had given him, and she would cut out a page for every point he lost. She would make me hold the pages. Then she would burn them in the fireplace while Julian watched. I would feel the heat on my face. I would smell the old paper turning to ash. I would see my brother's eyes die a little more each time. And through it all, I maintained what my mother called my vacant smile. It was not an expression. It was a survival mechanism. I had learned that if I did not react, she would grow bored. If I did not give her the satisfaction of a flinch, She would eventually stop and focus on Julian's tears, which were the real prize. I kept records. That was my hidden profession. In a password-protected folder disguised as a system file on my laptop, I documented every incident. Date, time, duration. Instrument used. Julian's supposed failure. My mother's pre-transaction mood. The post-punishment gestures. The apology cake. Always strawberry shortcake from the patisserie on Oak Street. She believed a $13 slice of cake could reset the moral ledger. I cataloged the brand of the belt, the gauge of the extension cord, the decibel level of her voice. I cross-referenced Julian's academic calendar with the frequency of the sessions. I built a predictive model. I could forecast with 87% accuracy when the next beating would occur. I presented this model to no one. It was my art. My secret precision in a house that thought me senseless. Julian and I developed a private language. A set of glances and finger taps. I would tap my collarbone twice to tell him I was okay. He would tap his sternum 3 times to say I'm sorry. We never spoke of it aloud. Our mother had the house monitored. She called it security. We called it the panopticon. But she could not monitor the space between our eyes. That belonged to us. When I was 15, Julian placed 3rd in a regional investment pitch competition. He had projected a 17% return on a green energy portfolio. It was brilliant work. But 3rd place was not 1st place. My mother received the news during a conference call with a client. She muted the line. She smiled at Julian. She told him to go to his room and wait. Then she looked at me. I calculated the variables. It was a Tuesday. She had a board meeting in 3 hours. The punishment would be severe but brief. She chose the brass corner of the built-in sideboard in the dining room. She liked symmetry. She positioned me so that my left temple aligned with the sharp edge. Your brother needs to understand the consequences of mediocrity, she said. I did not argue. I never argued. I simply made a note in my head. Tuesday, 3:47 p.m. sideboard brass corner radius approximately 2 millimeters. Julian's offense regional pitch 3rd place. She shoved me. My head snapped back and hit the edge. I heard the sound before I felt anything. A wet crack like a branch breaking underwater. The cognitive latency worked in strange ways. I had time to observe the spray of blood on the polished brass. I had time to see Julian bolt from his room, his face a mask of terror. I had time to watch my mother grab him by the shoulders. Stop it, she snapped. She's fine, look at her. She's still smiling. I was smiling. I couldn't control the muscles anymore. They were frozen in that vacant, placid expression. Julian was screaming. His voice sounded very far away. My mother knelt beside me. She pressed 2 fingers to my neck. She examined my pupils. Her crisis management training flickering behind her eyes. She made a calculation. She stood up. We are going out for dinner, she announced. Julian, stop crying right now. Your sister needs rest. When we come back, she will be ready to forgive you. Julian stared at the dark pool spreading across the hardwood. His lips formed my name. Iris. I tried to tap my collarbone. My arm would not move. My mother dragged him toward the front door. She did not look back. Clean it up before we return, she said to the empty air. As if I were a maid who had spilled wine. The door clicked shut. The house fell silent. I lay there and watched my blood migrate slowly toward the baseboard. It followed the grout lines like a curious liquid creature. The cognitive delay meant my thoughts were still forming. Even as the pressure in my skull built like a silent scream, I remember thinking I need to update the model. The predictive accuracy will drop after this outlier. And then I thought Julian is going to need me on Friday for his calculus final. I should get up soon. I did not get up. Death was a transition of unexpected gentleness. One moment I was staring at the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. The next I was hovering near the ceiling, looking down at a girl who looked like me but was not me anymore. She was curled on the floor in a posture that suggested interrupted sleep. The back of her head was a dark, abstract painting. I felt no pain. I felt no cold. I felt no warmth. I felt a profound curiosity. I drifted through the house. My house was now a museum of the recent past. Julian's laptop opened to his portfolio analysis. My mother's espresso cup still half full. My laptop in my bedroom. Password protected. The predictive model glowing softly on the screen. Waiting for an update that would never come. I followed the pull of something. A thread tied to my brother's heartbeat. I found him at La Maison, the restaurant where my mother took him to calm his nerves. He was sitting across from her at a corner table. His face was the color of the linen napkins. She was slicing a filet mignon with surgical precision. You need to maintain perspective, she was saying. Your father is going to contest the trust fund again next quarter. His new wife has a son now. A toddler with his name. You are the only leverage I have. Julian did not speak. His hands were under the table. I drifted closer and saw that he was tapping his sternum. 3 times. Again and again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I reached out to tap his shoulder. My fingers passed through him. A chill that was not a chill. He shivered. He looked around the restaurant as if he had heard a distant bell. I tried to scream that I was there. That I was fine. That nothing hurt. Ghosts do not scream. Ghosts do not have throats. Ghosts are the echo of a voice after the sound has died. My mother ordered dessert. She told the waiter it was a celebration. Her son had placed 3rd in a prestigious competition. She left a 30% tip. She knew the power of appearing generous. On the way home, she stopped at the patisserie on Oak Street. She bought a slice of strawberry shortcake. I'll give this to Iris, she told Julian. She always bounces back faster when I sweeten the deal. Julian opened his mouth. I saw the words forming. She needs a doctor. Something was wrong. There was so much blood. But his voice had been trained out of him. 13 years of conditioning had sealed his throat with cement. He said nothing. He followed her home like a shadow. The house received them with silence. My bedroom door was closed. My mother placed the cake box on the hallway floor. Iris, she called, her voice coated in honey. I bought your favorite. Come out and let's discuss how you can help your brother prepare for the retake. Nothing. I floated beside Julian. He was staring at the gap under my door. A thin line of dark red had begun to seep through. It touched the edge of the cake box. Julian's face went slack. All the color drained from him in one long exhalation. Mom, he said. His voice was a stranger's voice. Flat and hollow. She turned. What? I think Iris is really hurt. My mother glanced at the door. She sighed the sigh of a woman who believed the world was a stage and everyone else was a poor understudy. She is fine. She is always fine. She doesn't feel anything, remember. That is her gift. Julian did not respond. He walked to his room. He closed the door. I followed him. I watched him sit on his bed. I watched him take out his phone and stare at a photo of us. A candid from 3 summers ago. We were at the lake house my father had rented before the divorce. I was holding a sparkler. He was laughing. We looked like children who had not yet been turned into collateral. He typed a message to me. "Iris, please answer." I saw the message arrive on my phone, which was still in my pocket, which was still on my body, which was still on the floor. He waited. He waited for 17 minutes. Then he opened his nightstand drawer. He removed a leather journal. It was my journal, the one I had handwritten before I switched to encrypted files. He must have taken it from my room weeks ago. He opened it to the last entry. Today, Mother used the crystal decanter. Julian scored a 98, not a 100. The stopper left a crescent mark on my shoulder blade. Julian cried for 14 minutes. I counted the seconds. I want to tell him that it doesn't hurt. But I am starting to understand that his pain is the real punishment. And I am just the instrument. Julian read this entry. Then he read another. And another. His shoulders began to shake. I wrapped my ghost arms around him. He could not feel me. He could not hear me. But for a moment his breathing steadied, as if some part of him knew. The next morning my father arrived. He came with gifts. It was my birthday. I was 16. Julian was 17. The age of trust fund vesting was approaching. My father had not visited in 8 months. He stood in the foyer with a Tiffany bag and a forced smile. "Where is Iris?" he asked. My mother gestured toward my door. "Throwing another tantrum." He set the bag down. His eyes landed on the cake box still untouched in the hallway. A thin line of red had dried around it like a macabre ribbon. "What is that?" he said. "Strawberry shortcake," my mother said. "She won't come out to eat it." My father took a step toward my door. Julian moved faster. He planted himself between my father and the door. "She is sleeping," he said. His voice was iron. Julian had never spoken to our father in that tone. It was usually appeasement, usually diplomacy. "Let her sleep." My father studied him. "Where did you get that spine?" he murmured. My mother interjected. "It's nothing. She's being dramatic. She cost me a client yesterday with her sulking." My father and my mother began their familiar dance. Accusations and counter-accusations. "You left us. You bled us dry. You never wanted her. You called her a liability." Julian and I had heard this performance 100 times. It was their version of foreplay. A way to remind each other that they still existed. I floated in the middle of it all. Transparent. Irrelevant. Julian slipped away during their argument. He went to the kitchen. When he came back, he was holding a paring knife. I did not understand. Not yet. He walked to my door. He pushed it open. The smell hit him first. He did not flinch. He had been flinching for 13 years. His body was exhausted of flinches. He stepped inside. He saw me. The real me. He knelt down beside my body. He set the knife on the floor. He took my cold hand in his. "Iris," he whispered. "I am so tired." I tried to pull the knife away. I tried to kick over the nightstand to make a sound. My ghost hand stirred nothing but the air. Julian picked up the knife. He looked at the photo on my desk. The lake house. The sparkler. He smiled. It was a real smile. Not the performance smile he wore for our mother. It was the smile of someone who had just solved a very difficult equation. He pressed the blade to his wrist. He drew a line. It was not a violent gesture. It was precise, like a signature on a contract. He lay down beside me. He rested his head on my shoulder. His blood mixed with mine. Two dark pools converging. "It hurts," he whispered. "Iris, it actually hurts." And then his breathing stopped. I caught him when he rose. His ghost was silver and trembling. He looked at his hands. He looked at me. He looked at our bodies tangled on the floor like discarded marionettes. "We don't hurt anymore," he said. It was not a question. It was a discovery. "No," I said. "We don't hurt anymore." My mother came home 2 hours later. She was carrying shopping bags. She had bought Julian a new blazer for his upcoming internship interview. She set the bags on the counter. She called our names. Iris. Julian. I bought treats. "Let's try this birthday again." The house answered with silence. She frowned. She walked down the hallway. She saw my door wide open. She saw the dark smears on the floor. She saw Julian's blazer still hanging on his chair. She stepped into my room. The scene did not compute. 2 bodies. One decaying for over 48 hours. One fresh and red and final. She dropped the shopping bags. A bottle of apple juice shattered. She staggered backward. Her hand found the wall. She smeared a red handprint on the drywall. Her mouth opened and closed. She made a sound like a broken garbage disposal. Then her training kicked in. The crisis manager in her assessed the situation. She could not spin this. She could not bury this. She could not call a contact at the police department and make it go away. This was not a scandal. This was a crime scene. She sat down in the hallway. She pulled out her phone. She dialed 3 digits. "I would like to report a tragedy," she said. Her voice was perfectly composed. The kind of voice she used with clients. "My children have done something terrible to themselves." She paused. "I believe it was my daughter's fault. She was always seeking attention." The trial lasted 7 weeks. The media called it the Tiger Mother murders. They dug up my encrypted files. Julian's journal. The neighbor's testimony that they had heard crying but never saw bruises because bruises don't show on a girl who never flinches. My mother's defense attorney argued she was a single mother under impossible pressure. A woman abandoned by her husband. A woman who had to be both mother and father. The prosecution played a video from my laptop. I had recorded one of the sessions. I had set up my webcam with a keystroke trigger. Not for evidence. I told myself it was for data collection. For the predictive model. The video showed my mother swinging a leather belt. 17 strikes. I counted each one with a calm voiceover. I noted the time. The reason. The ambient temperature. The jury watched a child cataloging her own abuse like a research assistant observing lab rats. When the video ended, 3 jurors were weeping. One was staring at my mother with naked hatred. My mother took the stand. Her attorney begged her not to. She insisted. She wore a navy blue blouse and a string of pearls. She looked like a senator's wife. She told the jury that she loved her children. That her methods were unconventional but necessary. Iris could not feel pain, she said. It is medically documented. My actions caused her no suffering. She was a tool to teach my son accountability. In today's permissive culture, you may not understand. But I was raising a future leader. The prosecutor asked her if she checked on me after the fatal blow. She said I thought she was faking. He asked if she had ever taken me to a doctor for the gash on my head. She said I planned to after the cake. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They returned with a verdict of guilty on 2 counts of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to life without parole. When the gavel fell, Julian and I were sitting in the empty jury box. He held my hand. "It's finished," he said. I looked at my mother's face. She was not crying. She was not remorseful. She was furious. Her eyes swept the courtroom. She was searching for someone to blame. She found only empty space. We followed her to the state penitentiary. We had no choice in the matter. Ghosts are bound by unfinished business, they say. Our business was not revenge. It was witness. We wanted to see what a life without audience did to a woman like Miranda Vance. The answer was elegant. It destroyed her. Not because the prison was harsh. It was. Not because the other inmates shunned her. They did. She was a child killer. In the hierarchy of prison society, that meant she was less than a cockroach. But those were external forces. What truly unmade her came from within. It started in her second year. She was reading a book on her cot. A trashy thriller she would have mocked in her previous life. Suddenly she gasped and slapped the back of her own head. She looked around wildly. "Who hit me?" she demanded. The cell was empty. Except for us. We were not touching her. We were simply there. A month later, she woke up screaming. She said someone had taken a belt to her back. The guards restrained her. The prison doctor examined her. There were no marks. No redness. No welts. But Miranda wept and begged for morphine. "My skin," she sobbed. "My skin is splitting open. Make it stop." The doctor diagnosed her with psychosomatic delusional parasitosis. Fancy words for the mind biting itself. But I understood what was happening. Her brain had spent 16 years inflicting pain on a daughter who could not feel it. Now her brain was repaying the debt. Every lash of the belt. Every cord strike. Every slam against the sideboard. Her nervous system was reconstructing the sensations from memory. And since she had never felt them herself, she had no tolerance. No callus. No armor. She was experiencing 16 years of vicarious agony in a compressed loop. She became the family shock absorber. The irony was so perfect I would have laughed if I had lungs. Julian and I watched her deteriorate. We watched her negotiate with the empty air. We watched her offer apologies to shadows. We watched her beg for forgiveness. Not to us. Never to us. She apologized to her own reflection. To the ghost of her reputation. To the vanished trust fund. She did not once say, "Iris, I am sorry." She did not once say, "Julian, I should have protected you." Her remorse was a closed loop. A narcissist's Ouroboros, consuming only itself. One evening, during a particularly violent phantom episode, she collapsed on the concrete floor of her solitary cell. She was sobbing. Her hands were clawing at her shoulders. She was crying out for her lawyer, for her publicist, for anyone who could make the pain stop. Julian walked over to her. He knelt down beside her. He placed his ghost hand on her cheek. "Mom," he whispered. His voice was the temperature of the last day of autumn. She went rigid. Her bloodshot eyes focused on the space he occupied. "Benny," she croaked. She called him by the name she had given him in her head. The golden boy. The investment. The legacy. Julian. But he just smiled. "I am sorry," he said. "I know she taught you that pain was the only curriculum. She taught you that love was a transaction. She taught you to measure success in fear. But you forgot to ask one question." He leaned closer. His lips brushed her ear. "Did you ever check the model?" She did not understand. She would never understand. He stood up and walked back to me. He took my hand. Her screams followed us through the steel door. They followed us down the corridor. They followed us past the razor wire. And then they faded. The night outside was vast and quiet. The stars were indifferent. The wind was gentle. "Where to now, Iris?" he asked. He looked lighter. The weight of the world had been lifted from him. Or perhaps we had just become strong enough to carry it. I thought about the patisserie on Oak Street. The window display with the marzipan flowers. The taste of strawberry shortcake I could no longer remember. But whose idea still brought me comfort. "Let's go get something nice," I said. "It'll settle our nerves." Julian laughed. It was a real laugh. A sound I had not heard since the lake house. Since the sparkler. Since before we became line items. We walked into the dark. Not toward a light. Not toward a judgment. Just forward. Two children with a glitch. One who could not feel pain. One who felt it too much. And in the absence of our senses, we had finally found each other. But before we crossed the threshold, before we let the world swallow us whole, I paused. I looked back at the prison. I listened. And beneath the wind, beneath the hum of the electric fence, I heard something. A faint rhythmic tapping. 2 taps on a collarbone. I'm okay. 3 taps on a sternum. I'm sorry. The signal was coming from inside the prison. It was not Miranda. She was still screaming. It was coming from another cell. Another story. Another child turned into a tool. Julian squeezed my hand. "Did you hear that?" he asked. I nodded. We waited. The tapping continued. A Morse code of the abandoned. And I understood then that our story was not over. It was simply the prologue. There were others. There would always be others. Children with glitches. Parents with ledgers. And ghosts who did not know they were allowed to leave. "Should we go back?" Julian asked. I stared at the prison walls. I thought about the predictive model still saved on a hard drive in an evidence locker. I thought about the video files, the timestamps, the data. I thought about how my mother had called me a liability, a defective asset. She was wrong. I was not a liability. I was an archive. And archives do not disappear. They wait to be read. "No," I said. "We don't go back. We stay. We stay until every cell is empty. Until every ledger is balanced. Until every child who was told they were a tool learns they were always the author." The tapping grew louder. It spread from cell to cell. A quiet rebellion of finger bones. We turned away from the darkness. We faced the prison again. And we smiled. Not the vacant smile our mother had crafted for us. A new smile. A smile that promised time. The stars began to rearrange themselves into patterns that looked like spreadsheets. The wind began to sound like a courtroom transcript being read aloud. And somewhere in a cell block, a woman named Miranda Vance felt a new sensation. It was not pain. It was worse. It was the realization that she was not the protagonist of this story. She was not even the villain. She was just the opening line. And someone else would write the rest.